You're listening to Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Overdoing It, where our team of library workers dish about their latest reads, views, and passions, alongside fascinating conversations with local luminaries. I'm your host, Lauren Walker, director of the Coventry Public Library, and my pronouns are she, her. Let's dive in and see who my guests are today.
Hello, my name is Christian D. Rezendes. I am the director of a historical documentary series called Slatersville, America's First Mill Village that I've been working on forever, mainly for 15 years. I first attempted it about 20 years ago and then came back to it later. 8 episodes are out and they're on Tubi, PBS, and Prime, and I am working on the final season now, which is the final 4 episodes, 9 through 12. And those will be out when they're done. So, thank you for having me.
What is going on, guys? My name is Dave Lawlor. I go by Filmmaker Dave on all social media platforms. I am first a urban explorer, photographer, and videographer. Keep it short. I love exploring old abandoned places and seeing what we can find and share with the audience.
Well, welcome, Christian and David. A little bit later in the show, we'll talk all about the Slatersville series. But before we get to that, let's start out, as we always do, with what have you been reading and watching?
This is such a great question because my best friend, they just recommended a book for me, and it's called Attached, The Science of Adult Attachment and How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love. That's something I'm trying to work on my own personal relationships. And then another book that I really love is The Valley of the Blackstone. It's People in Its Mill Village by Al Clyburn.
That's great. Is that generally about like the Blackstone Valley? And,
yeah, it's strictly the Blackstone River Valley. I think it has actually, I think it has both Massachusetts and Rhode Island. But yeah, I really just enjoy being able to read up on my local history here. Yeah.
Very cool. I'll have to check that out. I live in Cumberland, so I'm right there.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what am I reading and watching? I was just watching The American Revolution by Ken Burns, which I'd already seen, but I wanted to revisit just because I find him to be a master of what he does, and I love seeing this one. And that's been pretty much it. I have, as far as shows go, I've been catching up on Only Murders in the Building because
nice.
I've been enjoying that immensely. Right now, as far as reading goes, I'm not reading anything specific other than scripts that people hand me and stuff like that to go through. So it's I have to catch up. I have to get back to that world at some point.
Sure, fair enough. I love Only Murders in the Building. I feel like Martin Short and Steve Martin are such a good combo. Can't go wrong. David, were you watching anything recently?
Yes, I like comedy stuff. I'm a huge fan of the Ted season 1 and 2. I think they're absolutely hilarious. I also love that it's created by Seth MacFarlane, who went to RISD and graduated there, and he went off and did Family Guy. But in terms of that show, I really like all the, like, it's kind of like a nice slice of life, but with like this like comedic twist with a teddy bear, and seeing all these different social issues and political issues being brought into a television series.
I haven't seen the series. I mean, the movie is a classic.
The movie's cool, but like when you watch the TV show, it's just like this like high school kids like POV with this teddy bear who just like got all washed up from like being a celebrity, and now he's back at home.
That's funny. I'll have to check that out. I just finished reading The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, which was for my book club, and it was really good. It's a novel about these two sisters who they're from a small town in the South, and it starts, I want to say, around like the 1950s. And the town is full of light-skinned Black people who left their other community to basically be like treated equally in their own town. But there's a big emphasis on like the lighter you are, the better you are.
Oh gosh.
And so there's these twin sisters who grow up in this town, and of course they're light skinned. And due to like a few different things happening in the town, they run away and they move to, I think, New Orleans at first, and then they kind of split up. And one of them marries a darker skinned Black man and has a dark daughter. And when she returns to the town, it's like a whole thing. And, you know, she's like,
Oh.
I'm Black. Why shouldn't my daughter be Black? Like, why does it matter what shade she is? And then her sister passes as white and marries a white man. And they're estranged for many years. And then basically they kind of find each other. We're also seeing the stories of their two daughters and their different experiences in life through like the 70s. And it just is like a really good story. So I can highly recommend that book. And then for what I've been watching, my husband has been on a like spooky summer kick lately, and is trying to make me watch horror films outside of October. And I'm
Oh
not a big
gosh.
horror film person, but generally when he's like, I want to watch something scary, I'm like, pick a thriller or something that's not like too scary, and then I'll watch it with you. So we recently watched this movie called Creepy, which is a Japanese horror film directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. And it's about basically there's a serial killer living in this neighborhood, and he's sort of innocuously wedging himself into the life of this family.
Oh
And
gosh.
then it really escalates. And it's a very good thriller, but it's
Oh, I like the
not
sound of
like
this.
really gory, which I don't really like gore. So yeah, it was a really good thriller, really well done, definitely very creepy, which is the name of the movie.
Where did you watch this?
That's a great question.
I gotta write
Let
this
me
one
just
down. That
look
sounds
that
cool.
up real quick. It doesn't look like it's necessarily free. Oh, it looks like it's on Pluto TV for free. We probably rented it on Amazon
Okay,
Prime.
cool.
But yeah, so that was really good. I can recommend that. And then I just finished watching The Burrows on Netflix. Have you heard of that?
I have not. What's that about?
It was good. So it's a series. I don't think there's going to be another season, but it's a series about this. I guess it's like an elderly community or like a 55 plus community. And I don't want to give spoilers, but there's a supernatural reason why it was created. And basically, the main character is played by Alfred Molina, and he moves into this community and starts noticing that strange things are happening. And he and his friends have to like basically like save everyone. It's hard to describe without giving spoilers because it gets very sci-fi very quickly. But yeah, it was really good. Alfred Molina, Gina Davis, lots of really good actors in it. So I
Awesome.
can highly recommend that as
I do
well.
want to see that now that you mentioned. Alfred Molina voiced the octopus in Remarkably Bright Creatures, if you saw that.
I did not. I haven't seen that yet, but that's funny that he voiced the octopus because he's also famously Doc Ock in
No
the
way.
Spider-Man films. Yeah, in Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films.
Yeah, I love those films, man.
I hadn't even put that together, but yeah.
I wonder if
that
that's
is-
why they asked him to do the voice of the octopus, or if that's just a coincidence.
I wouldn't be surprised.
He also just has a great voice, so.
Yeah, it totally does. And I just saw Disclosure Day, which I absolutely loved.
Oh, it was good. I haven't seen it yet.
I loved it. And there was all these cynical reviews before you went in. I love Spielberg's work. Only have a couple of his movies I don't jive with, but the majority of his work, he did not disappoint here. I mean, there are people going back for multiple viewings.
That's good to hear.
So it's just a really, really good film.
That's good to hear. Yeah, we both, my husband and I wanted to go watch it, but I think he was nervous because, Steven Spielberg's getting a little bit older, and every time he makes another movie, Nate's a little like, does he still have it? Like, I don't want to watch a Steven Spielberg movie that I don't enjoy. And
Yeah,
so,
no, I
yeah,
get that. He really does. I mean, he's 79 years old, and it's like, man, he did not sleepwalk through this. This because I loved the Fablemans, had no issue with that. I loved the films. Strangely enough, the films that I don't like from him start with W. War Horse or War of the Worlds. I mean, they were like okay, they weren't terrible, but I'm like, you know. I mean, he still has. I mean, as a filmmaker, over decades, years and decades, you evolve, you change, you are doing new things. He's still there. He's still there, and he does not. I think one of the things that I once heard Sean Penn say is the tragedy of the American filmmaker is some of our best become our worst, and I would not put him in that category. So yeah,
that's good. That's good to hear. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out.
sure.
Can you each talk a little bit about your background and what brought you to the Slatersville documentary project?
Okay, well, for me, I'm from Slatersville, and I've done other films, both documentaries and narratives before. And about 2000, let's see, 1993, I was starting to film my town in its shape then for all sorts of reasons. And the abandoned mill then really kind of struck me, and I was 18 at the time. So um, I was shooting all this stuff, and so that's why I tell everybody the first shot you see in the first episode of Slatersville, I took when I was 18.
Wow.
So so you see shots of it through the years, and then about 2004 or 5, I tried to do something, and then I shelved that. Jumping through a lot here. Came back to it in 2011 because I had heard that the town administrator at the time said she wanted to get a film done about Slatersville to promote the new national park that was being put before Congress, which was later approved in 2014. And I said okay, and then they were going to get the funding for it, and then that got canceled. And they said, since you already started something and you have a passion for it, we'll do what you want. Go ahead and do what you want to do. You go and get your own funding to start, and we'll work in cooperation with you. And so that's what happened. And it started by late 2011, early 2012. We started rolling again. I didn't know it was going to be a series. Really, when I started, I wanted to do something really in depth and unique and not something that was forgettable. But, and I wanted to discover things that people, including myself, really didn't know. But that sent me with a 250-year story essentially down a road that took several years to accumulate interviews, research, information, books, photos, articles. I mean, the things that had sat in drawers for 100 years. I mean, you name it. And it was in the uncovering of that we found the drama of the story. Um, and there were major turning points. And when we discovered major things, we realized, okay, this thing just got bigger. Okay, how do we do this? Okay, how do we? So eventually, that came to COVID, which shut everything down, which was a game changer because then things sort of opened up for the series for me. Rhode Island PBS at the time contracted with us, and we delivered the first 5 episodes by the fall of 22, and then there are others to follow, and then the second season came out 6, 7, and 8 in 24, and now I'm working on the final 4. So it's grown, and a series of miracles and angels along the way have made that happen.
Nice. I remember sitting at the Blackstone Valley Tourism Council, or that's where I work. I do a lot of photos and videos for them. And I recall going through my Facebook stuff and I saw comments and messages, I think, from Christian about Slatersville. And I think at the time I just kind of like ignored it and I didn't know what was going on. And then I learned more about Christian and what he was doing. I was like, oh, we literally do the same thing. And then I believe Christian reached out to me, and I've been a drone pilot for the series for the first several episodes or first couple seasons. So it's been quite the trip. And my background is Blackstone Valley. I had a studio out in the Ashton Parkway, like that area of Cumberland. I lived in this little studio next to the train. I explored the old historic mill in the district, and I just been in love with the Blackstone Valley since. And it kind of just aligns having Christian reach out to me to do some drone footage and some interview stuff for him. So it's been quite the trip.
Very cool. And what is special about Slatersville? Why make a docuseries specifically about that mill village?
Well, let me just start off by saying, it's been really fantastic to work with David through the years, on and off on a lot of some of our best drone shots he's gotten, and to have connected with him and somebody so passionate about mill history and his online presence and name, he's everywhere, is like really cool. So I'm grateful for that. Why Slatersville? I think because, well, first of all, it's always in the title, America's First Mill Village. So if it was a first mill village, then what was significant about that? How, and I had the question of, okay, who do I have to interview? How do I tell this story? And so through the people that told me where things were of a particular generation, mainly the 20th century, of course, um, I learned the layout of the place. I learned how it worked. Um, and so you say, why so many episodes about something? And it's because kind of what I said earlier, which was that once you start to go down the rabbit hole of certain aspects of this 250-year story, you understand the three generations of the Slater family, for example, that take you into at least take us into the early 20th century, and what their impacts were, what they did well, what they did wrong, and what the purpose that the first generation served, and the second, and the third, and so on and so forth. And in that, with the materials we found, you discover the drama, because you're always looking for the dramatic element in documentary of what is the hook, what is the story hook, what do we do? And I think for me, at least for as far as season one goes, I discovered that history was compartmentalized. And so it's like if you go to Old Slater Mill, you get that story. If you go to Slater Memorial Museum in Norwich, Connecticut, you get that story. If you go to the Webster Samuel Slater Experience, you get that story. And then so on and so forth. And what this series attempts to do is actually blend those into sort of a long narrative. That so you get the connection between place and so on. And so I learned that with Samuel Slater, that's where a bulk of the story just kind of started and really kind of stopped in a way. Like people didn't really explore what happened with John Slater, his brother. What about the English ties? What about the second generation? Well, the second generation made its money in different parts, and you get those stories. And so that in and of itself, those were stories within stories that needed to be shared. And so you understood the great impact. And so while people look at the story of Slater, it's always about a doing. And for me, the undoing with Slatersville is just as significant as the doing. And the undoing comes with the third generation of the family in Slatersville really kind of screwing up and getting too rich to the point where they lived such a lavish lifestyle. They made careless decisions. They didn't care. And so we're given this American story of the father of the Industrial Revolution and all of this at the beginning. And then it just kind of goes generationally to people who either continue to bring that torch forward or don't, or shoot it down. And so for me, there's a little bit of a comical tragedy in that, but that's part of the reason why it just became a series and really grew rapidly.
I'm glad you mentioned the undoing, as you put it, because I grew up kind of visiting Fall River, and I didn't have the same like sense of the city as someone who lived there and like actually grew up there. But instead, I was fascinated by like the Fall River Public Library, the Central Branch, is like this beautiful, I'm not sure if it's a Carnegie library, but it certainly looks like it. It's this beautiful building. It's like, I think marble in some places on the inside. I just remember going there and feeling like I
And
was.
there's a dome inside, right?
I think so. Yeah. It's been a long time since I've been there, but I just remember when I was a kid and my mom did our family's genealogy. And so she brought me there on several occasions, that it was like a palace. And then I would walk outside and let's just say like South Main Street in Fall River does not look the way it looked in the 1900s anymore. And you
Yeah.
can look at the buildings and you can see that once like it was a really prosperous city and now it's not. And I think that kind of like heartbreaking graffiti on a beautiful building look was what really like drew me in a sense of like I was also a kid who was fascinated by the Titanic and other tragedies. Like I think
Yeah.
something about it really interested me about how did it go from the way it was to the way it is now, and like a little bit of can it be fixed, and all of that. So I think for anyone who's interested in mill history, that's got to be a tie-in, because you can see the evidence of these mill villages all over the Northeast, at least. And there's got to be something that we can do to like bring back those communities that were at one time very prosperous, and a lot of them are no longer prosperous because of the undoing of the mills. So I think that's part of what makes it so fascinating.
David spends a lot of his time walking through skeletal remains.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I say it, of mill, these beautiful buildings, this architecture, these buildings that are just sitting there rotting a lot of the time. So how do we bring that back to life? And that's what pulled me in. I saw an empty mill building that was at one point the heart of my town, and I was like, why is this being allowed to rot like this, you know? And I know David asks himself that question every day.
Yeah. I like kind of going off the two of you guys. Like I know for me, my favorite city to explore is Woonsocket. It gets a lot of hate from the public. There's a lot of stuff in the news dealing with like drugs, crime and whatnot. And I always find purpose beyond that. And it starts with like reading books, reading the history, and going to like the root, like looking into the Arnold family, looking into Edward Harris, where he was able to purchase a small piece of an island, which is now today Island Place, which then became the rubber company mills, and then they helped World War II when they expanded up to Alice Mill. So it's like all these connecting points, even to go to like further back to like early colonization with Colonial. Main Street in Providence is just down the street from me, and like that's where Edward Harris's family originated. He was one of the first settlers here, and then they moved to Lime Rock, then Lime Rock to Albion to Woonsocket, and then it just keeps going and going. And I love that type of rabbit hole where I find all these different things out. And Slatersville was another one where I didn't know too much because no one really taught it outside of Slater Mill. So when I heard about John Slater, I wasn't really fascinated. But as I got onto this project and doing the flying, I opened myself to more of the history out here, as well as just being part of the history and the documentation through the series. And it's just another beautiful mill village, which is the first one. So it's kind of cool to see where it starts and how it's prospered over the years and what we look at today. And I feel horrible when I look at places like Woonsocket and sometimes Central Falls or Pawtucket, like just seeing the empty storefronts and seeing those historical books that show photos of like hundreds of people just dashing down the sidewalks. And it's a lot different today. And like, I've tried to like put like 2 cents in, like I was part of like Woonsocket Downtown Collaborative, and I want to see these main streets all prospering again with the right businesses, with the right plans and goals. And again, that's all comes down to like politicians too. And it's like such a huge undertaking, and it's a very timely thing. But being part of the documentation and telling the story of what was there, I think serves a great purpose, and being able to be a part of all this in Rhode Island's amazing.
Can I jump? David, you might be able to answer this for me. I once heard that at one point there were 140 working mills in Woonsocket, and now it's down to like less than 12. Am I
I
right on
don't
that?
I don't know that for sure. I know the banks of the Blackstone River probably had thousands of them,
Yeah,
but I don't know the actual for Woonsocket. I'll have to talk with the historical society. Irene probably knows.
she probably does.
Oh
My grandmother worked in the Glenark Mill.
yeah, nice. Probably not nice, but
No, she loved it. She at first she was at the Royal Weaver Mill in South Attleboro when she came here. She was 16. Couldn't speak a word of English. Had to learn that, and then made her way over to the Glenark Mill. Worked there from 1934 to 47 when my mom was born,
oh wow.
and she loved it. She rode out the 38 hurricane in the Glenark Mill.
Wow.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
yeah. So, but the love, what I grew up with too is like, I was born in Woonsocket in 75. I'm an 80s kid. My cousins lived on Wood Avenue. I would be there a lot of the time between North Smithfield and Woonsocket. And my understanding was we made fun of Woonsocket. That was Woonsocket was there to be made fun of. That was how I was raised. And not by my parents, but just by the world around me. And but I would hear my grandmother constantly talk about how wonderful the city once was, like going back 40 years from that point,
Mm.
how Main Street was, how beautiful it all was, and if I could only see it. And you see these pictures, you go into the Woonsocket Historical Society, as you've done, David, you see these pictures, and it's like all the world gone, you know. But the needs of those places diminish when the mills went. They just went away. The Southern Trickle. So
It's interesting that this pattern of decay and like just population diminishing in the work, like it's everywhere. Like Providence, Woonsocket, Slatersville, everywhere.
hmm
Anyone that had a working mill village or city or town, you'll see that same thing happening. But
hmm yeah, very true.
And speaking of historical societies, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the research process for the series and where you had to go and what kind of research you had to do. Because I can tell I've watched the episodes that are out right now on PBS, and I can
Thank
tell
you.
that a lot of research went into it. And I'm sure that, like you said, there were a lot of rabbit holes and things that were discovered along the way.
Well, I mean, the research phase, what I learned early on is that I had to learn the story backwards because the people in the first half of the story were dead and they were still going to be dead by the time I got to them. So I have to go and interview the people who are alive who can tell me about the 20th century. And that's what we did. So that's what I mean. Like we were working backwards. And so first we learned more about Kendall, who was the third mill owner who came in. And then you have a 250-year canvas, if you will. And you have to like try and fill in all of these details as you go. And then over time, that's why it took so long. It was just the time of trying to figure out who was who, especially in the 19th century. Because without Ann Holst at Clouds Hill Museum, who's a Slater descendant, I don't know who the hell was who. You know, without the Blackstone Valley tourism people connecting us to Belper as they had done in the mid '90s, we wouldn't have had that. You know, so the series with all the research that was done still stands on the shoulders of a lot of the people who preserved and this information and also built partnerships with people, with the community, with countries across the ocean, and so on. And so, but I mentioned before, in the fifth episode, we kind of reveal these what I call the Waterman papers. The Slaters married into the Watermans in the 1870s, and so the Watermans ended up with a bunch of documents that were of handwritten letters that spanned from about 1848 to 1924. And there was a man named George Waterman III in New York. So I called him up and I said, "This is what I'm trying to do." And he goes, "Well, I just have some papers on the Bartlett House. I'm not sure like that would be really of any use to you." And one of the things I learned early on was if someone tells you that I have X and it's probably worthless, it's the opposite. And that happened a few times. And so he came in by train, and it took us days to comb through all this stuff with Ann Holst here and an intern and one of our other consultants combing through. And we didn't even know there was like an index card diary from Rufus Waterman. There were these letters with siblings yelling at each other on paper. And that was the great part, because you know that if you started to read these things, you're like, ooh, there's something going on. But it took us a long time to put all the threads together. And I'm sure there's a gazillion other threads we didn't even hit. So when we did that, we realized that we had at least a two-parter, as I thought back then. But over time, like, no, you have a series here that can build dramatically over time. Those papers sat in a drawer in Manhattan for 70 years untouched. So they were pristinely, it's like they look like new.
Wow.
Most of them.
Very cool.
And yeah. The other funny thing, too, is like you realize that somebody sent this letter off. Back then, they didn't have Xerox machines and emails, obviously. So, copy that letter that you're going to send. Okay. So you'd see the letter that was received that got somehow preserved, and then you saw the copy of that letter that was also handwritten out. So that's how they did things.
Right.
And we had to put all of that together. So whenever you go into an episode and you're focused on a particular amount of time, it opens up a can of worms that you're like, oh man, I didn't cover that. How do we figure that out? In episode 6, the Salesville rioting sequence that took place in Salesville, Woonsocket is a huge part of that. It's also the most expensive sequence in the entire series because we had to pay for that footage. But that opened up aspects of unionized labor across the later episodes. We had to fill those details in. So that happened a lot. And so that process is with assistance too. I have to mention Gail Denomi here, because Gail Denomi has been a huge help and research assistant, as have all of our other historical consultants and people who've helped along the way, and then various topics, and that's why it's just so huge.
Well, the research definitely comes across.
Yeah.
I have to say, so I grew up, of course, in Massachusetts, and Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts it didn't even feel like I was moving to another state when I moved to Rhode Island. But I feel like it's not just a history of Slatersville, it's a history of Rhode Island. And it doesn't quite cover the entire state, but I've learned more about Rhode Island history from watching this series than from anything else. So I think it's really cool to be watching something and, you hear people talking about Burrville and Woonsocket and Pawtucket and all these places that it's like I drive through there all the time and I drive past that all the time. I had no idea there were Salesville riots, and I drive down Salesville Road every day. So I think that's very cool. Yeah.
Well, the key to that is because you have to stay on the course with the story, and you have to determine very carefully what is too tangential. Why am I going over to Burrville? I'm going to Burrville because I have to make this point. Why am I going to Norwich? Why am I going to England? Why am I going to South Carolina? You're like, you have to go there just enough to make the point and then get out.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for this thing that happened in Wellesley in 1915, then this wouldn't have happened in Slatersville, stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know that it's been quite a long time in the making, but what has been your favorite part of working on this series and investigating the history of Slatersville?
Well, I'd say like the most moving part for me. I've interviewed about 158 people and I've lost 43. And that's been hard. So I think getting to know everyone along the way and I've learned a lot, making the connections that the series has around the world in a lot of cases throughout the country. Had I not had this experience of making the film, I wouldn't have met these people. I think for me, in having, I didn't know all of the people that have passed super well. Obviously, that's a lot. But I did get to know some of them through the years. And then I had people calling me from their hospice bed,
Oh,
asking me how do I catch the last couple of episodes. I had I filmed a father in 2005, and I filmed his son years later, and his son is gone now.
Wow.
Uh, and I filmed siblings that are gone, and and so that's become part of the struggle, I should say, in getting to the end. I mean, the loveliness of remembering them, but also like, these people aren't getting any younger. um, I think of the movie Hook a lot. I know it's a random. There we go, Spielberg again. Because do you remember? Have you seen Hook?
Yes.
Do you know? Okay. Do you remember how like he keeps as a child as Peter Pan, he keeps going back and to the real world when he leaves Neverland, and people keep aging,
Mm-hmm.
and then finds Wendy and it's Maggie Smith. She's like, I can't go with you anymore.
Yeah.
I'm old. It
wow.
feels like that because I'm looking at a screen and I'm editing these people who I filmed years ago. They're speaking in their time periods. They're saying what they're saying. And then I'll go to the supermarket and I bump into her and she's 15 years older and she's 94, you know. And well, how's it going? Good, and then or they're gone completely, And so that's been an extremely humbling part of it for me. But it's also hard, you know.
Well, David, I know it's hard to follow that, but have you had any particularly impactful experiences on this project?
On this specific project, I just would gone out and just like shot drone stuff, and I just like put it in the Google Drive folder. I wasn't really like part of the research and like the more like in-depth part of it, but I mean, I'm honored to be a part of this project. This type of work carries over in my own work where I go to like research centers. I love the Rhode Island Historical Society, just like Christian. Before I was doing these like soccer documentaries for the Tourism Council and this other stuff for Go Providence, I was at historical societies and libraries just reading books on Blackstone Valley cities because I don't do long form stuff, but like I want to be like almost like a personality that just talks about these places on social because most of my audience, they're all on Facebook. They're from like 40 plus audience members, so like that's like my thing, and people love these like fast moving pace uh, short documentary social videos. So, but being able to be a part of all this has been an amazing. And Christian sent me out to mill villages and like towns that I've never been before, and that I want to like research and go back and visit. And I just love Blackstone Valley, so you can't go wrong with this series.
Well, I think David also forgot, but he's in the series.
I am,
but,
yes.
But he's not shown up in the episodes that are out yet. He shows up in the final season, along with Jason Allard.
Yeah, so I think that season, like that episode, it speaks a lot about who I am and what I do as well as Christian, because the three of us, we all have this same passion, a little different in each way. Like Christian's that documentary, like PBS, like high tune. Then you have Jason, who has like this same idea, but like a younger voice and the way he images and just edits. And then you have me, who's just like wants to be in there as well and climbing around these abandoned places and bringing them in a way that it's digestible on social media. So yeah, we all have our different types of qualities, and we all have come together in various times in our lives to work together.
And I said earlier, like David walks through skeletal remains. The aerial work that he has done on these mills that have either been abandoned or burned down or rough shape, whatever, that plays a role because we're coming up on the final season of this story, which has to do with Slatersville closing after 150 years, the mill moving south, the village in devastation. Where does the Blackstone Valley goes to hell in a handbasket in the 1960s? The 55 flood that David knows all about. And so we're coming up on the catastrophic apocalyptic portion of our program that deals with the century and a half, 2 centuries of industrial waste, the cleanup of the Blackstone River, contamination. I mean, you name it. So there's a lot that the Blackstone Valley, and I'm sure David will agree, has paid for in the last 50 years, as far as the accumulation of all of that industry. What was it? The Al Kleiberg quote, David, that he said, the Blackstone River is a sewer with a history. It's something like that. Yeah.
I don't know that one, but I know like very relatable quotes being like, the hardest working river in America, the most polluted dead river, like almost no life in this river. But we've seen it
Yeah.
come a long way from when Congress passed laws with like Clean Water Acts and then ZAP and like other things that we still see today. But I'm like the guy that I just want to be in the mills and seeing all this industrial history, even though it's trying to get cleaned up. But
So whether it is, Christian is probably something research related. David, it might be an item that you found. But what do you think is something that's the most surprising thing that you've discovered investigating this history?
There have been a lot of surprises. I think the one that stands out randomly is there was a guy in Slatersville named Amos Lockwood at one point, and he ran the village for about 30 or 40 years in the middle of the 19th century. And Amos Lockwood left, became a businessman, and then formed a company called Lockwood Green. And that was formed to build mill buildings and do stuff that was in industry. Now, Amos Lockwood ran the Sunday school. He was a supervisor at Slatersville Mill. Okay, he knew the Slaters very closely. And so you had that, and then jump 100 years later to another mill owner, Henry Kendall, who has 24 mills around the world and plans to close the Slatersville Mill and transition the workers from that plant to their new facility in Bethune, South Carolina. Which company is hired to build that mill in South Carolina? Lockwood Green.
Wow.
And when I put that together, that blew my mind. I said, did Henry Kendall even know that Amos Lockwood was from Slatersville and that the name originates there? That was stunning. But on top of that, like, I find so many stunning pieces of information that, are these puzzle pieces you fill in. I mean, I don't know. I could go on and on.
That's fair.
The story I want to go with and the find that I have, which kind of catapulted my like social media presence, is this little marble. So this is a pelletized glass marble. They use these at Ashton Mill in Cumberland to melt down into fiberglass. This is where the invention of fiberglass came from, out of Cumberland. And they melt these down and they turned it into fiberglass, and they would weave it into the spacesuits for NASA. These are all over Cumberland, around the river, around the banks, Blackstone River State Park, maybe thousands.
Wow.
In the banks of the Blackstone, in the sediments, but like these were what got us to the moon through that invention. So it's really interesting. And the thing, like, I love this story because I have a friend, John Marsland. He gave me a blue marble, I think, from up in Mass.
Yeah, he gave me one too.
Yeah, he just gives them out, and I've actually been kind of doing that too.
We're having breakfast. He's like, "Here." I'm like, "Thanks."
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing is, I lived in the factory. I lived at Ashton Mill at the Lawlor plant where they would melt the marbles, like the glass factory. I lived in the garage and I had a studio there, and you could find these marbles everywhere. Like, in the room next to me is where they would melt and, produce all these. So I was like, holy cow, this is incredible. But yeah, it's funny how history kind of ties in and how it kind of just travels with you, because I didn't realize all this history until more lately in the last like 2-3 years. But I've been sitting in this history since like 2016, and I'm just realizing all these ways how they like connect. And my friend owns a plant now, and he just does all his like own industrial work there and woodworking. And sometimes I'll go by, find some marbles and hang out. But I love the history, and being a part of it and living in it has been great, and working with Christian and finding other people in the community like Christian, Jason Allard. I was telling you, I went on a boat to Harbor Island in Boston, and we went to an abandoned hospital island. Like, it's incredible the people that you meet and how it all kind of ties in. And being able to have those same interests.
Yeah, it truly is.
And now I have like hundreds of these in my room, and I'm like trying to like give them out to people as I like see them. But I love the history, and I don't know, it's awesome.
Well, is there anything else that either of you would like our listeners to know that we haven't already talked about?
I think for Slatersville, if they want to learn more, they can go to firstmillvillage.com. They can check out the series on PBS Documentaries, Tubi, and Prime. And we're working hard on the final season, and I hope to have good news about that later this year. So,
yeah, and if for those who have been watching or just started watching Slatersville and you want to learn more about Blackstone Valley, Rhode Island, go to Tour Blackstone. That's the organization that I do a lot of work for. Great folks. I just love the history, and they allow me to go out and document as much as possible within like tourism guidelines. But get out and explore. There's so many places, so many things that you can find. You might find abandoned things. Like we have the Blackstone Canal, stretch it up to Slatersville, and there's so much history hidden. And I just encourage everyone to get on their feet if they're able to, and just walk, and you'll find something incredible.
yeah, what David said is like there's so much history and there's so many stories within stories that can be truly fascinating. So the Blackstone Valley is an endless treasure trove for that. And I think that what we can do to point that out to people, and especially with David's work with the films that he does and with his obsession with the Longley building.
Yeah.
Yeah. I say that positively. And Ann and Hope and all the other things that he's been focusing on. So, we need more people like us to keep telling the stories of the Valley. So I'm grateful for this opportunity you gave us today, Lauren.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Agreed. We wrap up the show with a segment called The Last Chapter, where we talk about a library or bookish related question. So today I wanted to ask, since you both have done your fair share of research, and I'm sure there are plenty of questions that you have that are still unanswered, if you could know the answer to any one mystery, which would you choose? And this can pertain to Slatersville or Rhode Island history or really anything at all.
I think for me, I've been doing a lot of like mill history, but I don't know all the truths behind it and how dark it is. Like going back to John Brown, the Brown family, and how they started the Lonsdale Company, but like that family, like there's a lot of icky stuff in there pertaining to the West Indies and how they had the Ann and Hope ship. I don't know all the specifics on what they did specifically, but I'm sure the Rhode Island Historical Society has like logs and stuff about who was on these ships, who were being transported or trafficked. And those are things that like no one really talks about unless you have educational folks that can really dive into those stories, or museums that have those. But it's something that I don't really know. And I'll be honest, like because I'm in this mill stuff so much and I love it, it is fair to know what those other sides of it was. Because honestly, our history in Rhode Island is very messy. I just started volunteering at Roger Williams National Memorial. So I'm talking to Ranger Andy all the time about Roger Williams. And like, I just found out that Roger Williams sold people for slavery, but it was like a two-edged sword or something. Like either he did this or they died. And it's just like, oh my God, what is this? And it's like, how did society, how did the world run? We're making changes, but sometimes I feel like changes are being undone too.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like trying to figure out all this stuff. And it's really something that needs to be taught too.
Yeah, yes to all of that. As far as mysteries go, I think there are so many that I would love to have been a fly on the wall for a lot of the conversations and transitions that took place. I have learned very humbly that the more I've learned about Slatersville, the less I know about it. And not just Slatersville, but Rhode Island history in general. Like right when you think you know something, you don't. And for me, I never would have been able to make the series in the way that it is if I knew everything at the outset. Because it not only would it not have been fun, but there needs to be a search and a discovery along the way when you do something like this. And so I think in general, especially when I dive deep into the episodes and try to connect everything, that's when I really discover things sometimes that I didn't want to know. I wish I didn't know that about that person or this town or that group of people or whatever. But when you study history thoroughly, you're going to encounter all of that. And the mystery, I suppose, is how you navigate through it and, come out the other end um, as a filmmaker or as a changed person.
Yeah, I think people are complicated. And as we were, all growing up with, myths of certain people and historical figures, it's easier to teach a child a much more simplified version of a person, but everyone is complicated. And so I think as we delve deeper into anyone in history, you're going to find that there are things that you never knew about them, and some of them aren't so great. And I think every single person has things about them that aren't so great. So yeah, I think that's probably very common for historians to be sort of fascinated by a person, but the more you follow that fascination, the more you're left with, do I want to keep following this fascination? And what are the implications of that?
That's how I feel. Oh, that's how I
Yeah.
feel with the whole slavery and everything and all these mill
Oh,
owners.
yeah.
Like, I want to, like, I definitely have found good folks out there, like Edward Harris. He was an abolitionist. But, like, if you go to the Lonsdale Company, I don't know exactly what they're all about. So it's just like, oh, no. But I love this stuff so much.
Well, to jump off of that, you've seen my eighth episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how I lost sleep over that episode, I don't know. How could I possibly describe it? Because it was so tough to be from here and to do that episode.
And this is, remind me, is this the one where we talk about the dam?
Yeah, the dam,
Oh,
the
yeah.
the upper dam, and then the blackface and the slavery and all of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like I only touched on a fraction of what was going on here and what Black Eagle Sun faced at that time. Um, and then it just went down this other rabbit hole, the Nipmuc and Nipsachuk and all this other stuff. And I'm like, oh, God, there's so much buried here that I don't know. And I can respect the fact that it was in another era and that certain people did from another. I'm old enough to remember jokes that were acceptable in the 90s and the 80s that would not be appropriate today. I mean, they weren't appropriate then, but that was society was like, okay, that's cool. That's funny. We can punch down on those people. And then it's just like, well, no, we really can't. We should know better. And so then you go look back 75 years at what the town did, or 100 years. Not to end this on a gloomy note, but, episode 8 shows the KKK marching in Washington in the mid 1920s. And then we just on this past July 4th had a bunch of white supremacists do the same. And that was really depressing to see, you know. So there are these things that, the names change and the tactics may change a little bit, but the problems are still there. And I think we have to continue to face them dead on.
As they say, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. So it's always good to, learn more, even if it's troubling to learn it. The more you know, the better off you are, most likely, even if it doesn't always feel that way.
Oh, right.
Absolutely.
Well, we don't have to end it on a downer, because when I was thinking of this question, my answer was on a totally other playing field than what your answers were about. I was thinking about the Mandela effect. And so if you don't know what that is, I think it gets its name from, for some reason, like thousands of people were positive that Nelson Mandela died in prison, and just like fully believe, they remember seeing it on the news, they remember the day that it happened, and that just like never happened. So my experience of that has been that I was so sure that there was a like the movie Kazam, in which
Oh, yeah.
Shaq plays a genie.
I'm so convinced.
There was another movie called Shazam starring Sinbad as a genie. And I can remember the trailer for this movie. I remember seeing it as a kid, and it never happened. And so I just want to know what the deal is with the Mandela effect. What is this? And as someone who is experiencing it about this one random specific movie that apparently never happened, what is happening in my brain that's causing that?
No,
So,
I definitely,
yeah.
I'm with you on that. I still think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that Sinbad swears he wasn't in that movie, but I feel like he's in on it and he's lying to us.
So who's actually in this movie? Does it not exist?
The movie does not exist. There was Kazam with Shaq, and that was it. There was no other genie movie starring Sinbad, and I swear there were two.
Interesting.
But who knows? Who knows? I was also a child at the time, and I think anyone who has that memory was a child at the time. So we're probably just thinking of something else, but that's my mystery.
I interviewed somebody the other day for Slatersville, and we're doing a sound check just like before. And I said, tell me what your favorite movie is. And he just sits there very calmly and says, Transformers, the movie, the animated 1986 version. I went, what?
Wow.
Wait, what?
That exists, right?
That is a very specific deep cut.
Yeah, and it was like that. For my generation, that movie has its own little basket of niche conversations that are unusual. So anyway, end on a random.
Well, thank you both so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed this chat.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Appreciate it.
Overdoing It is proud to be a resident partner of the Rhode Island Center for the Book and brought to you by library staff and community members all around the Ocean State. The project has been funded in part by the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services. If you'd like to share your answer to our last chapter question, send us an email at overdoingitpod@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at overdoingitpod. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review us to help us reach more Rhode Islanders. Thank you for listening, and this has been another episode of Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library Podcast. We're overdoing it, but you're doing just fine.